Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. And this video is about an injury that happened a couple weeks ago to Joe Ryan. I just kind of wanted to wait and see how the Twins started to manage this situation before talking about this, because I want to make a video not just about Joe Ryan's injury, but about how I think it's going to affect the Twins and whether I think we still have a chance to make a run and be successful in the playoffs this year despite an injury to a huge player in our rotation. So, for those of you who don't know, yesterday I made a video about J.J. McCarthy's injury, which we now found out is almost for sure going to be season ending because it is the worst version. It's a full repair. We were talking about the difference between the trim and the full repair yesterday. It is a full repair. So we've got him missing. Now we are missing Joe Ryan. He has a grade 2 teres strain. I don't know how to pronounce that word. All I know is that it is going to be a weeks to months type injury. And then so we now are without him. We are currently without Carlos Correa, who has his plantar fasciitis issue that he is still trying to make his way back from. We have Brooks Lee out, who is on the 10-day IL. Who knows when he'll be back. Chris Paddock might not be back the rest of the season. We certainly hope he will be. Brock Stewart's out for the season. And then on the Viking side, we have J.J. McCarthy, who is out most likely for the season. And just today, like literally 10 minutes before I went to film this video, I saw the news that Jordan Addison was just carted off the field during practice. So it's just, I don't even know what's going on anymore. It's just the Vikings franchise, the Twins franchise, Minnesota sports just continue to be cursed throughout their existence, and especially this season. So it's just continually frustrating to see all these injuries continue to pile up. Not to mention the fact that Royce Lewis is always on the precipice of being injured. We have multiple other players like Byron Buxton, who is currently injured, although I didn't include him on that list because he's not going to be gone for very long. We just have this constant revolving door. We are never completely fully healthy. I also want to talk a little bit about just the frustration with the lack of transparency when these injuries come up, because Twins fans are not dumb and Minnesota sports fans are not dumb. We understand that there could be, a big injury. And when Rocco Baldelli comes on and says, oh, it could be a minor strain. It's probably not that big a deal. We don't know. We're going to do more tests. And then a few weeks later, it's revealed that it's this huge injury. Or like if they say, oh, we're just putting him on the 10-day IL, we'll just see how it goes, and then it ends up being a season-ending injury or something like that. I just don't understand how the office or front office hasn't gotten it through their head yet that that's more frustrating to Twins fans than if they had just told us outright. They want to continually pad the truth and just give us the best case scenario at every single thing. And I don't know why they think that that's the best way to go, because it might ease our minds for a day or two, but then it just makes us more and more frustrated when we get this completely inflated perception of what Rocco Baldelli told us was not that big a deal. Same thing happened with the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell initially referred to JJ's injury as a little bit of a tweak, or something that was just going to be looked at and it was a precautionary thing. Just recently, Byron Buxton was out for a few games with a precautionary injury. They literally told us, we only took him out for a precaution, and then he was out of the lineup for 4 straight games, and now he's hurt again. It's just, I understand how you might want to make it seem like it's not as big a deal to to get peace of mind for the fan base, but now we just don't trust you anymore. The fan bases don't trust any word that the front office or Rocco Baldelli is even saying at this point. And they continue to make bad decisions all across the spectrum, and this lack of transparency with injuries is just another bit to add on to that whole fire. But I'm going to leave that alone for now and actually get to the content of the video. First of all, this is even more proof the Twins should have traded for something at the deadline. If anything, just for depth. We were talking about how, it would be great if we improved our team at the deadline by getting another guy in the rotation that could be our, game 1 or game 2 starter and kind of move everyone else down and have even more good pitching. But really, what we were talking about is even if we don't get that, we need to get another solid option that's going to be good in case there's an injury. And now that we didn't do anything at the trade deadline, not only do we not have that extra push for the playoffs, we also now are without our best player and have no one to replace him. And now we're going to be scrambling, trying to get these young players reps, which we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks. I certainly hope that they continue to play well, but it's just like we would have solved so many of those issues just by having that depth available by trading at the trade deadline, and we didn't do it. So now, here we go, our current Twins rotation without Joe Ryan. We have Bailey Ober, and I feel like it's deserving at this point for me to put him in that first spot at this point because he's been our best pitcher. We then have Pablo Lopez, who needs to figure stuff out. He is continuing to struggle. I've really felt like if there's any player that's going to get back up on that horse and be the powerhouse that he was last year, I thought it was Pablo Lopez. But time is starting to run out. It's the second to last month of the season, and he's still continuing to struggle. There were a couple points where I felt like he was starting to turn that corner, and then he started to falter again. He had another kind of rough start in his last appearance. I feel like there's still a chance he could pull it together, but it's getting more and more concerning. And then we have Simeon Woods Richardson, who at certain points this season has been amazing, but we've also seen that lack of experience come into play when he plays under the big lights and when he plays really good teams. So that's another concern for the playoffs. And then in that 4th/5th spot, in that depth spot, we have kind of a combination of Louis Varland, who pitched today, and then we have David Festa, who has been kind of a on and off guy since he's been called up. He's had a couple rough starts. He's had a couple really good starts. He's also been pulled kind of early in some of his starts, and we might continue to see that happen. And then recently, Zebby Matthews just pitched yesterday, as I'm recording this, and he actually had a really good first outing. Obviously, you can't read too much into that, but really nice to see him have a good first start, getting called up into the big leagues. And he might continue to be a factor down the stretch if we continue to keep him up and if he continues to play well. Of course, as these guys on the offense are starting to come back up from injury, it's going to be a tough decision of who we're keeping and who we're sending back down, but we're going to have to see there. So now we get back to the question at hand, which is, can the Twins be successful the rest of the season, potentially get a playoff spot, and can they actually still make a name for themselves in the playoffs without Joe Ryan? The answer to that question is maybe. I mean, I truly think there is still a good possibility that we could be a 5th or 6th seed in the playoffs and be dangerous. But the only thing is, honestly, the rotation isn't even our biggest concern at this point. Because the two biggest issues are the fact that our bullpen in recent weeks has been one of the worst in the entire MLB, and also the fact that this offense is really, really struggling once again with situational hitting. It's been the same issue we've seen the last 2-3 seasons, where we just cannot hit with runners in scoring position. I mean, right now, even Royce Lewis is struggling to hit with bases loaded. We saw multiple situations. I mean, I just finished watching the game today where we lost against the Royals, the 12-10 start, and the bottom of the 8th, runners on first and second were down 3. You got to come away with at least one run there, especially since there was one out when that happened. There are just some things in the playoffs that you just cannot struggle with the way the Twins are, and the two biggest ones are bullpen pitching down the stretch late in games. You're going to blow so many games in the playoffs the way the bullpen's pitching right now, and on top of that, you also can't have situations where you've got a guy on second and no outs and not get any runs out of it. Those are the runs and the little things and the big things, honestly, that are going to lose you games in the postseason. And right now we have everything under the sun, offensively and defensively, that are going to keep us from winning big games in the playoffs. Now, we have had enough offense and enough good pitching to get us through some of these games. I mean, we tied things up with the Guardians, split the series 2-2. We had a rough game today, but we still did beat a very good Royals team 2 out of 3 games. Like, we are still winning games in the regular season. And so, the way I've been talking about this team the last couple minutes, you'd think that I would have no confidence in us in the playoffs. But honestly, we've got guys coming back from injury. We've got, a few bullpen arm guys that are continuing to play well. We've got in the bullpen Duran. He still is decent. Right now, he is not pitching to his level that he did last year. And if he can get up to that level by playoff time, that's going to be a huge help. Not to mention the fact that Sands, Alcala, Jax, they've been pitching really well as well down the stretch, and they need to continue doing that. After that point, though, it gets kind of shifty. Richards, since we traded for him at the trade deadline, has been absolutely horrible. I mean, today he was lucky to get out of that inning without completely blowing up the game. And then Thielbar, I mean, if I even see Thielbar out there for any extended period of time in these last couple months, I'm going to be angry. He does not deserve to even be on the roster anymore. And if we had more depth options, if we had traded for better depth options, he wouldn't be on this team right now. He would definitely be DFA'd or some other option. So that's rough too. It would also be a huge help to this bullpen if Paddock were to come back this season. We still don't really know exactly how that's going to happen, if that will happen. We're still trying to play it by ear. Paddock is obviously not going to risk the rest of his career, try and come back too early from this. But if he's throwing and it's looking good, he could be back. And it probably would end up being the same situation as last year where he came back from injury, pitched out of the bullpen in the playoffs, and was actually really, really good. And I feel like that's shaping up to be really where he belongs. He has been a really good long reliever in the past, and this season when he was starting, it was rough. He had games where it was really clear he didn't have it from the beginning, and it just, starting out games, he has not been great. And so I think getting him back in the bullpen would be a huge help to our bullpen that's been struggling, and also I think is where he belongs in terms of what he can do best for this team. I also think it's going to be a big help for the bullpen because we have guys like Festa and Varland. Do we really necessarily trust them to go, 5-6 innings in a playoff game? I don't think so. So, in that situation where we might have to have, Lopez, Ober, and then SWR pitching the first 3 games of a series, we might potentially need that combination of Festa starting and Varland coming in, or the opposite. I feel like that could be a serviceable situation. Maybe 3 innings or 4 innings out of each of them would be a big help to, not throwing out all these bullpen guys that we don't necessarily trust. And that's kind of what we're trying out here. I mean, Ober hasn't pitched in like 9 days now, and he's pitching tomorrow, but that's all because we've been trying to throw in all these young guys and getting these opportunities. While it is still pretty clear that we're in a playoff position, we're trying to try out all those things now so that we can make that push in September and kind of know what our game plan is. But long story short, do I think that the Twins can be successful down the stretch, potentially still take the Central? I'm not so sure about that. Guardians are looking really good still, and it felt like those last 2 games against us kind of vaulted them back into that area of dominance, and they've been winning ever since. Can we beat out the Royals for the 5th seed? And if we don't beat them out, can we beat out the Red Sox or the Mariners for the 6th seed? I certainly think we can, especially if our offense starts to pick up again. But again, none of that's even going to matter if we don't get our bullpen under control and if our situational hitting doesn't improve and our hitting with runners in scoring position doesn't improve going into the playoffs. It's just not going to be a good combination. It's not going to be a recipe for success against these high-powered offenses and defenses that we're going to be seeing here in the playoffs. But let me know what you think. Joe Ryan, most likely out for the majority of the season. We still haven't even talked about the possibility of him coming back in the first week or so of the playoffs if things do go remarkably better than expected. We got to kind of operate under the expectation, though, that we probably won't see him in any high capacity the rest of the season, and the Twins are taking the necessary steps to try and make that happen. Hopefully no more injuries happen, and hopefully we can get those injured guys back on the roster. Correa being back would be huge, and Buxton will be back in a few days. But again, let me know what you think. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side.